Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we are talking about Facebook because Facebook's own employees think that it's hypocritical for them to go after Apple's new privacy policy. Now, here's what's going on. If you recall, about a week ago or so, I actually did a slideshow video and obviously a corresponding podcast on Apple's latest new iOS version. iOS is what runs iPhone and iPad. And it was literally slide after slide after slide of the many different ways that Facebook is data mining the hell out of you. That's right. Apple's new operating system for the iPhone literally shows you every single way that Facebook is going after you for data mining. And it was just crazy. It was nuts. Now, Facebook responded to that, if you recall that video or podcast, if you watch that. They responded by taking out a full-page ad in publications like the New York Times, the Washington Post, and I think the Wall Street Journal was the third one. But there was another major publication that they put this out there in, decrying how Apple is hurting small business and how Apple isn't so great on privacy themselves, and I will dive into that shortly. But first, let's get an update from Facebook's own employees. Now, multiple sources are reporting on this, but I did find an article from BGR by Chris Smith that I thought had a really solid and quick breakdown of this. And so to quote a direct paragraph from that article, and I quote, "The Facebook campaign is more about Facebook than a defense of small business. Even though the company paints it that way, Apple's iOS 14 privacy feature might hurt Facebook's bottom line by convincing more people to opt out of data tracking. The EFF, or Electronic Frontier Foundation, has already blasted Facebook for the way it's attacking Apple, saying the latter is doing the right thing and calling for Google to follow. I did as well in my video." To continue the quote, "A new report shows that Facebook's own employees aren't happy with the company's approach, calling it hypocritical." Now, BuzzFeed was the one that obtained audio from a presentation that Facebook did to its workers on Thursday, as well as internal comments about the Facebook-Apple privacy fight that is going on within Facebook. Now, here are some of the takeaways and things that Facebook employees wrote internally in response to Facebook's PR campaign against Apple. And to quote, and I've got a couple of different quotes here, to quote a Facebook employee, "It feels like we are trying to justify doing a bad thing by hiding behind people with a sympathetic message." Another quote states, "Aren't we worried about our stance protecting small and medium-sized businesses will backfire as people see it as, subquote, Facebook protecting their own business instead." Another quote says, "People want privacy. Facebook objecting here will be viewed with cynicism." I think that's true. "Did we know this would be bad PR and decide to publish anyway?" Another quote says, "How do we pick a message that looks less self-serving?" I like that one. The next quote is, "We're not going to be the only ones that should be allowed to track people without their consent. Any company can do that, even smaller startups and malicious actors." Apparently, some Facebook employees have justified Facebook's data mining policies. The next quote that I've got here for you is, and I quote, "The only thing I'm hearing again and again is, subquote, this is bad for businesses." And I'd really like someone at the top to explicitly say, subquote again, "People are better off if they don't know what we're doing, if we don't have to explain ourselves to them, if they don't get a choice to opt in or opt out of our practices, if we obscure it as much as possible behind interesting features and then get them to accept surreptitious tracking on the back end as long as we downplay it." That was from a Facebook employee asking their leadership to basically say that. That's crazy. Another quote, and this is the last one I'll throw at you here, from a Facebook employee, and I quote, "Why can't we make opt-in so compelling that people agree to do so? I can think of a dozen ideas that might make people join. Why couldn't Facebook create its own version of Prime, for example, that gives you discounts on purchases?" Now, obviously, outside of the reporting by Chris Smith of BGR and all of this isn't the first time that basically employees at large data mining companies, because that's what they are, have spoken out. Both Facebook and Google, two of the largest data mining companies on the planet, have faced this kind of internal dissent before. And I'm guessing that realizing you're violating people's privacy all day, every day doesn't really make for a conducive work environment for a lot of these people. And so here we have these people complaining about how their company is basically generating revenue and then complaining that somebody else is violating privacy by enumerating how they're violating your privacy. Now, let me be clear here. I want to be very clear. Apple's new iOS feature that enumerates the zillion ways that Facebook and others are data mining you is refreshing, and I applaud Apple for shining a huge light on this, and I'm hoping that Google does the same thing, as I mentioned in my last video, but I don't think they will. But, and I say this, Apple is no saint when it comes to privacy. I have written articles on this, I've done research on this, on the ways that Apple themselves have data mined us over the years. Most notably, a few years back, and I wrote on this for a previous publisher, they were sending back a ton of information about you and your iPhone, from your iPhone, every 72 hours or so to Apple's servers, even if you had iCloud disabled. They were caught doing that years ago. I balked at their advertising, I believe it was 2018 or 19, in Las Vegas before a conference. I believe it was CES, so it would have been the beginning of the year, where they had billboards that said, and I quote, "What goes on in your iPhone stays in your iPhone." I did an entire video and podcast on why that is absolutely not true whatsoever. But I will say this. Apple has been 1,000 times better than Facebook at privacy. And that's primarily because their business model has traditionally been more about selling gadgets with some computers thrown in, as opposed to data mining you. That has driven their revenue. So in other words, when they're selling you iPods and iPhones and iPads and the MacBook Pro that, a handful of you buy comparatively to the Windows versions of all of this that are way cheaper, they're making their money selling you stuff. Now, however, now, as they start to get into content streaming, they're spinning up Apple TV, and this is way and above how they were selling you just stuff on iTunes. Hey, go buy a song for $1 or a movie for $3 or whatever. I expect them to get into the data mining game in a major way as well. Google and Facebook are making bank basically data mining you. It's free to you, so you're their product, and that is the truth. And so basically, I think overall Apple really talks a great game, but they are living in a house made of 20% glass right now, and I think that they are adding more glass daily. And as we know, if we're living in glass houses, we shouldn't throw stones. And so that is your news of the day. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, where they will data mine the bejesus out of you. And please follow me on YouTube as well, where they will data mine the bejesus out of you. And as always, stay safe and stay online, and in this case, stay private. Thanks, everyone.